Welcome to the LegalTube podcast, presented by LawyerLocate.ca. Join us as we explore the latest trends, strategies, and tools for promoting your legal practice in the digital age. Hosted by Mark Robbins, CEO of LawyerLocate.ca, LegalTube, and Digital MSpace, where we're all about legal marketing online for Canadian lawyers. Let's dive in.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. We're glad to have you here listening. I'd like to let everybody know that we're very, very fortunate to have our guests today from Acumen Law, Kyla Lee and Paul Doroshenko. They are the most senior attorneys at this law firm. It's a criminal law firm that also specializes in DUI. So I'd like to welcome Kyla and Paul to the show. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Doing very well. Glad to be on.
Super.
And
So
good to see you.
Kyla, as my audience knows, was here recently, and when we finally managed to get Paul's time scheduled to come again, we thought it'd be really great to have the both of you together because I think you bring a couple of two different perspectives on legal marketing, amongst other things. So with that in mind, I'm going to point out that in our first talk with Kyla, she explained, or we talked about how she got into the legal marketing on social media platforms, what it was doing for her personally, and what it was doing for her law practice and the firm. So to let everybody else know, Paul Doroshenko was actually an original member of LawyerLocate.ca, which is our main company that runs LegalTube, which runs the podcast. And Paul was with us, I'm going to say, roughly 20 years ago. And as Paul pointed out in the green room, that was kind of just when the internet was taken off. So what I'm going to ask you, Paul, is, given what I know, Kyla's activities have been online, I've started to notice you are becoming very active. How do we get from what you were doing 20 years ago with Lawyer Locate and kind of the more traditional marketing to where you are today?
Well, it was like an interesting, as you and I were mentioning, you and I have lived this, right? The 20 years ago, it was the phone book. It was the yellow pages. And that was the one way that clients could find you aside from a referral. And a referral was always considered the ideal way to get a client because all these lawyers want to control their clients all the time. They think, okay, if they come as a referral, I'll be able to control them. And this is the most prestigious way to get clients. And of course, that is not really making justice accessible to anybody. And so the internet came along, and there was another lawyer who beat us to the punch, but I was working in another firm, put up a website, and we realized, okay, now we're competing. We were paying a lot of money for our phone book ads, as you can imagine. And I never liked the fact that I knew that every client who came in had to pay a certain amount of that fee was to cover the phone book ad. And so um, when the internet, when we first started looking at a website, we realized this is a much more cost-effective way for our clients to find us. It's more accessible. And that's when, we created one of the first websites for any criminal lawyer in British Columbia. For any lawyer, it was a, fairly bare bones, simple thing. And that's when I got to know you, and we were engaged with that and lots of discussions about those things back then. But as you recall, back then it was all SEO, right? Your whole website to try and have your clients find you essentially was focused on jamming keywords in there in the hopes that people would search for those keywords because that was the early days of search engines. And, that was where we started trying to write content for our website in the hopes that you'd end up in the top of, well, it was still Yahoo, but Google, Yahoo, and even Alta Vista was, I think, still around when we started. But pumping them in, and then meta tags, writing your HTML, because it was all HTML. It was before there was anybody using WordPress or anything like that. And you're loading up meta tags in there. It was an interesting time. I mean, it's fascinating how it never slowed down, right? But the website now is not the be all and end all. As Kyla and I clearly know, engagement in social media is also important for us, and it's something that lawyers are scared of, and understandably so. There's good reasons to be scared of it. But I was on Twitter for a long time and very engaged, and I've left Twitter because of my concerns with Twitter, at X now, and so I'm no longer on there. I'm on Blue Sky, and I don't get nearly the same type of engagement just because of the way the algorithms work. But I'm also on TikTok, and TikTok does get people talking, and does make people aware of your existence. And you're hoping that at the moment that they hear their friend has been picked up for drinking and driving or an excessive speeding or something, you're hoping that they remember, I remember that guy or that Kyla Lee, that woman on TikTok who talks about traffic tickets and getting pulled over by the police. And then you hope that they get on the internet, and then you hope that they've got enough information that they can Google and zero down and find you. Because ultimately, you're not doing anything as a lawyer if you don't have clients.
Right. So you want them to say, I remember a guy on TikTok that sings country music, but also could defend you.
Well, they see the country music songs or whatever, and they might scroll past it, but they might hit it, a video of me, and then they recognize my face, and they're like, "That's a weird thing." Um, so I could spend my weekend skiing at Whistler, but I'd rather, spend my time on my country music or one of my other things that I do. Everybody's got their thing, right?
Nice. So it's interesting, Kyla, that you've come on. Obviously, you're a little bit younger than Paul and I, so you came onto the scene in legal marketing in a later time. So what Paul was talking about, which I completely understand. I remember what those days were like and what we had to do to help lawyers with their websites and with getting the SEO and all the content. That's not the case today, as we all know. Where did you kind of jump in?
Um, I don't know. I think I came in with sort of a small brand. On like I had my own website before I got hired working for Paul. And I wrote like a blog about like random things about law school and criticism of fashion and strange things. So when I started working for Paul, just kind of transitioned that more into focusing on the law content. So yeah.
So now let me ask both of you, because we're going to go forward a little bit. The buzzword today is AI, from a perspective of not to ask the traditional question of lawyers, because I don't think that's what we're here for, whether AI is going to be a problem for lawyers who use it for research and all that. No, I'm looking at the other side of AI as the tool to market your practice. And one of the big things that's coming out from all the work we do is the transitioning from traditional Google searches to ChatGPT searches. And the numbers that are coming back, Google, I know, is getting very nervous about this because they're losing a lot of people to search on ChatGPT because there's no monetizing of it, there's no advertising on it, and you're getting I think, because I've done tons of comparisons, I think you're getting a better quality search result. What do you guys think?
I mean, I think it depends on the context. I think ChatGPT operates on the information that it's kind of scraped from the internet and learned from people putting information into it. So I still think that it's vulnerable to manipulation. If you spend a lot of time telling ChatGPT things that you wanted it to say, you could probably persuade it to do that. I mean, we see examples like that. Like if you were to ask DeepSeek AI, for example, about Tiananmen Square, it'll say, I don't know what you're talking about. Refuses to answer that, right? Because it's been manipulated by its owners to not answer those questions. So I am hesitant that way, but I mean Google, because of paid ads and all of the things that they do with their process, is just as vulnerable to manipulation, just in a different way. So yeah.
So Google has right now, of course, these AI answers that they give on top, and their AI answers are often not bad. But the problem that we see is people will get, for example, in BC, an immediate roadside prohibition, which is the most predominant style or type of DUI. And people will think, okay, well, I'm going to try and sort this out myself, and I'm going to do a do-it-yourselfer. And those answers, even from the start on Google, are wrong. And then when they go into ChatGPT starting to look for things, and we've done it as an experiment, right? It is building its answers on the basis of things that are on lawyers' websites often.
Right.
And a lot of the stuff that we see on other websites are wrong. And if you go back in our blog goes back to 2008. And we've left all of those up there for historic reasons, but the law has changed. The law has changed many times over. And a blog post that we wrote in 2012 is no longer applicable. And ChatGPT is going back and using that often. And so we see that a lot of times the answers aren't great. I mean, we end up coming up as a recommended lawyers often on ChatGPT, probably because of all of those blog posts and Kyla's website and all of this other material that we've created, which is fine. I mean, we're we're happy to be there. But as far as it being used as a search engine, it's got its huge danger for people because they come away with incorrect responses on things. And when you engage with ChatGPT, we use it for some things, but we can see that some other lawyers' websites are being written by ChatGPT and they've got
Right.
huge mistakes. And the problem with ChatGPT is it's building the information that it is later going to use. So there's AI created websites for lawyers now, and that is what it's relying on. So it's like eating its own tail. It's taking
Yeah.
garbage that somebody created because they didn't ask the right thing and they didn't proofread it or they didn't know what was wrong when they posted it on their website. Most of the time, I suspect they haven't proofread it because I look at some of the things that have been posted on lawyers' websites and are just like, I can't believe you posted that on your own office website. Um,
But we use ChatGPT
but we
and
use it too. But we
we
like are
prove
very
it.
careful about how we use it, where we use it, and what we're using it for. And we've got these internal structures that we've created to be able to monitor and to make sure that we're not screwing it up. There's at least 3 sets of eyes go over anything that we've used ChatGPT for that we're using for content. But it does get some, as I say, it's eating its own tail, and it ends up with, I wonder if 20 years from now anything will be reliable if everything that's on the internet has been created by AI.
You make a good point, Paul. It's funny because interestingly enough, Lawyer Locate is in the process of creating their own AI for Canadian legal marketing, specific to the Canadian market, not for because and the people I'm working with out of the UK, one of the first things when we were talking about how to do these things, and you and I share a lot of the same thoughts, was garbage in, garbage out. That was the first thing he said. And we're about 3 months into the project, and now there's 48 agents that literally check each other in each step, and each step needs a human approval.
Yeah.
So we're forced, the way we're building this is going to force the lawyer that, yeah, this is going to help you with your marketing. It's going to do a lot of things automated for you. But at the end of each one of these steps, you're going to be asked to approve it. And that was the only, and he insisted on it. And I immediately understood why, because of what you just said. There's so many lawyers, so much content out there that I can see it's written by an AI. It's not been checked. They're just going, oh yeah, okay, put it up, put it up, put it up. The old idea of content is king, which we know is no longer true, not in the strictest sense, because
Still
we're
important,
so
but
much
not
relying on video. Sorry, Paul.
still important, but not, the same. It's not up there the same way as it once was. That's for sure.
I mean,
No,
now if you're writing content, you almost want to make it content that is digestible to an AI. You're not writing necessarily to an audience so much as you are writing to AI.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you on that too. I mean, it's sad. I've had these conversations when I started LegalTube, or I bought the URL, it was 20 years ago. And I remember Natalie, who you know, Paul, who's the founder of Lawyer Locate, said to me, why are you buying this? I said, I have a feeling that we're going to start to see less blogging in the legal vertical, and we're going to go to video, because the reality is there's a reason why YouTube's the number one or 1A search to, because that's where people are going. Nobody wants to read anymore. Everybody, show me how to do it. Walk me through it. Natalie and I are polar opposites. She likes to read instructions. give me a YouTube instruction. I'm a happy guy.
I think how many things that I repair or fix or try and figure out what's wrong with, and I go to YouTube, and
Right.
you know, so often I can figure it out. If I'm changing the light bulb in my car, my headlights out, somebody's going to explain to me that there's two clips that I press and I can pop the whole thing out. Otherwise, I'm going to be poking it with a screwdriver.
That's so true.
The
So go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, just getting back to AI, we're so early on in the AI world, but we found that with ChatGPT, if you haven't sat down and thought about and had enough experience with the preliminary question you ask it, that's how you get the dangerous content. And if you go back into a discussion, a chat with it, that's when it will start sticking in more unreliable material. And so we found that I need you to write this about this, and then I give it all the information that I need. And a lot of times it'll be long. I might write several paragraphs for instructions for it. And then I get what I've got, and then I go at it. But if I go into that chat after that, and I say, well, no, you're not quite right on this. You've missed this, put more emphasis on this. It changes other things and unreliability follows. And so there's a skill to it that unless people are going to put the energy into it, there's going to be people who will get better at it than others. What will be the situation in 6 months could be completely different, right? Because you don't know. With AI, everything's changing so fast.
Yeah, I think we learned very quickly from our experts that the key to proper results with AI is prompt is king. Yeah, spend hours on your prompt. Don't worry about, and then perfect your prompt, and then put it into whatever your AI you're using. You're using Cloud, you're using ChatGPT, whatever Gemini. But like you said, if you just try and have a conversation, that's where things go downhill. So this is why I think that none of them are pushing the conversation side of it. It's available now with ChatGPT and the other platforms, but nobody in those organizations are really pushing that as saying, "Hey, here's a great way to use our tools. You can talk to it."
Well, if it was better, I mean, it may get to the point where it is better, where you can have that conversation and it's not going to lose the other things. But when you're asking it to edit, unfortunately, it will edit things you didn't ask it to.
Yeah.
And that's basically, Kyla's nodding because we both tried it and found this sort of same problem. And you're looking at it and you're reading your final version after you've gone through 4 or 5 of them, and you're realizing this is nothing what I intended. And
Yeah.
now I've completely lost the point. You know, Steve Jobs had a magic about him that he could visualize something that he wanted, and he had it fixed in his brain, and he would describe it, and people never absorb it the way that you describe it. You describe it as best you can. Unless you are capable of doing the drawings or whatever, you're never gonna. Now, my problem, and I think the problem many people have, is you describe it to somebody, they go away, they come back, and your original vision in your brain is gone when you see the prototype or whatever they brought to you. Whereas Steve Jobs was able to remember exactly what he had in mind. His first version of the iPhone, he was like, they kept bringing it back to him, and he'd go, no, 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 you're not listening to me. And
Right.
eventually, when they got it, it was what he visualized. And that's a process of refining that works, but it only works for those people who can remember it that clearly in their mind. And most of us can't, right? You sit down, you're going to design a home. You've got this vision in your brain of how you want it. You sit down with the architect, they're going to come back with something completely different, and you're not going to remember what your vision was in your brain. And we found that AI will pull you along and you won't remember what you wanted. And that's one of those things that if you can do it in life, it worked for Steve Jobs, it can be very useful if you're one of the people who can visualize it well enough.
Right.
But rarely are we those people.
You make some really good points. So at this juncture, what I'd like to do is transition to something else that I know my audience probably is not aware of. But you are partners with Kyla in a company called Deep Blue. So I'm going to let you, without me blowing it, one of you or both of you, talk to me about what is Deep Blue and let's see what that is.
Deep Blue is a distillery that we opened in Richmond, literally right next door to our Richmond office, right around the corner from the courthouse. And I don't know, it's also been a little bit of a thorn in our sides for how long did it end up taking us? Like 7 years to get it finally
Oh,
open.
wow.
It was long. There was a
Yeah.
pandemic in between.
Yeah, there was a pandemic, which slowed everything down. You just subtract 2 years, but still it took a long time. But we produce gin, vodka, we've barreled a bunch of whiskey, we produce some flavored vodkas and something that we call better than rum.
Yeah. So Kyla and I have both had an interest in alcohol sales. We defend drunk drivers, and it's not vertical integration. It just happens to be, I like the idea of a cocktail. I like the idea of alcohol. I like the idea of enjoying a drink. I enjoy the culture around all of those things. And it's something that Kyla and I share, and people joke often that we have the same brain. Um, it's but there's also a history there. For me, I distilled my first time when I was 13 years old. Secretly made some vodka at home with parts that I had gathered to build my own still. And something I continued to do off and on until I got into law school, and then I decided I better not break any laws. Put that aside, and then I realized, we've got this space. It's something I always wanted to get into. Long family history there, where people either did it illegally or when it was marginally illegal. My family on my mom's side left the States partially to get away from prohibition. So we started investigating it, and we decided this was something we could do. The We were interested in making better spirits. There was things that we had tasted in various different places in our travels, and wanted to do something a little bit different. And we were also in a position to do it. The space was beside us. The landlord is a great guy. The food bank also is in our building, and it's one spot in Richmond that's going to stably be there because of the food bank and the agreement that the landlord's got with the food bank. So we decided, okay, well, this is something next door, we can do it. And so we started, you know, getting the drawings ready to build it, and ordered our equipment. And we were lucky, right? Because we are in a position where we're lawyers. And the nice thing about being a lawyer is you're not competing with people who aren't lawyers. So the margins are a little bit higher. We were able to buy our equipment without financing anything. And we bought most of our equipment from a company in Hungary. A lot of the distilling equipment, like there's a company called Bavaria Brewtech. They're not in Bavaria. They're not. Their head office is in Czech Republic, and everything's made in Hungary. So the best stainless steel welders out there are Hungarian, and so the company that we found, Hagio, that produces the most high-tech still in the world. There's only one other in North America, and it's in Florida. It's totally computer controlled. And it uses this different refining tower. The refining tower has a standard refining tower, so everything's pre-refined. You know, when you hear of vodka that's been triple refined, it's gone through a refining tower with, sometimes they've refined it 3 times. Ours goes through one refining tower, and then it goes to a separate refining tower that uses porcelain tubes. And the porcelain tubes are a different temperature from top to bottom. And so it circles around in there, and it tends to purify the vapors more than any other method that's been found so far. And after that, it's been purified to that extent. It is condensed, and we have alcohol. And so our vodka is the purest vodka that we've ever found, but we got really lucky in the end. So that's just making the essential essence of the vodka. We got it all together just over a year ago. We had all of our permits and operating, everything was cleared, and we went to run it. The Hungarians came to assemble the whole thing for us. This came in a shipping container, right? But they came to assemble it all and test it, and it worked, and it was great. And they left, and we tried to run it, and we're like, oh, this is not working for us. And
Not very good distillers initially.
I was so depressed. We bought a Spanish still to make gin, and that's a separate one. We first make the vodka and then we turn it into gin, right? That's how you make gin. But that was one we could figure out because it was one knob. This other one is computer controlled and there's all this electronic switches and everything. We're like, okay, we can get it in there. We can get the heat going, but where's the alcohol coming out? So I didn't even want to tell Kyla because she was so busy running the law office. I was like, I don't want to break it to you, but our like $1 million Hungarian still is not doing the job for us. And we're into this deep without any financing, and basically everything we've spent in it. But then I was in the Richmond office. I was walking to my truck in the morning. I was thinking, God, I got to get a chief distiller. And I've been in contact with some, and I hadn't had it, hadn't been going great. I was in the office in Richmond, in the law office, and some fellow elderly Asian fellow walked in the front door. We saw him on the camera system, and my assistant went up front and she was gone for a while. She came back and she said, his name is Juan, and he would like to talk to you about your distillery. He has a proposal for you. So I go up, you know, okay, maybe you'll buy it. I don't know.
At this
What's
point,
the
we're looking to get
proposal?
out.
He wants to park in front of our distillery because we can't make it work. I don't know. But he's 35 years in the beverage industry, 15 years as chief distiller for G&W Distilleries. He has a chemical engineering degree, and
Oh,
he laid off
wow.
about a year before when Labatt bought that distillery because they wanted the products that he developed. And the list of the products he developed over those years is just extensive, and he's just the nicest guy in the world. So I hired him right there. He started the next day, and that just kicked it all up. Suddenly, we were barreling whiskey within a week.
Oh, wow.
Our whiskey's got to be 3 years old before we can sell rye whiskey, Canadian rye whiskey, but we can sell whiskey now. We've got 1 year old whiskey now. But and he started developing all of our products, and it's just remarkable turnaround for us. We were thinking about branding 7 years ago, and culture has changed entirely. Nothing that we had conceived of 7 years ago would we go with now. And so we sat down again. Kyla and I also have a marketing company. We write some content for lawyers' websites in the States and other things. Not it's
Very limited.
it's limited and we don't want it to be big. Like
Right.
we're not trying to expand our marketing company because it really does take up a lot of what we're already doing. But we had the people to be able to turn on to this, and so we developed brands, and we were sort of thinking about our rollout for in the summertime for everything, and of course, trade war.
Yeah. Two, two
Um,
best, two best things that could ever happen. Juan and Donald Trump.
yeah,
Who could ever think
I
to
mean,
say
as much
that?
as I dislike Donald Trump, the fact that they pulled all of this American liquor out of the liquor stores in British Columbia has been the godsend for us. So it's, you're thinking of your sales volumes and trying to get attention of, we sell to private liquor stores directly, right? In British Columbia, and there's private liquor stores and there's government liquor stores, and they compete, fairly heavily. But the private liquor stores, there's some pretty beautiful private liquor stores, and they're entitled to set their prices however they want. And the BC government's got their markup, which is pretty significant. And getting into BC government liquor stores is kind of considered the holy grail, but it's not necessarily, the best thing. But going into private liquor stores prior to the tariffs and saying, okay, here's my box of product, let me show you what we've got, and getting the attention of the private liquor store manager was a little bit tough. But
Yeah.
now they phone us,
Now
and
they're
they're
like,
calling us.
we want Canadian, we want local.
And so we drive down and we let them taste it, and they're like, "Yeah, this is better than Tito's." So
Yeah.
it kind of makes it an easy sale now. So what we expected for sales and the like 3,000% beyond that at this point is an issue of production. And BC government is now carrying our vodka, Charm vodka, in their liquor stores as of this week. Uh,
Wow.
and we are in probably, I think probably 30 stores now on the island, on Vancouver Island. Kyla just posted on TikTok that we've got this distillery, and now this is, what we've got to do. And we ended up with a rep on the island who's just a lovely fellow who's connected with everybody. And any store he phones, they just want to meet. And So
combined.
we're into basically like a truckload, a pallet a month of liquor just being supplied to get started on the island. More than that, probably. I guess probably every 3 weeks. And
Wow.
then the liquor stores in the Lower Mainland. I went to deliver some today. Yesterday, I drove out to Everything Wine in Langley, and I dropped off 6 boxes, and I probably should have brought 12 because it's just solid demand. And so now Juan, who was, 63 last year, 64 this year, you would think he'd be on to retirement at that age, but he says, it's just such an enjoyable thing. And it really is just like a lovely job to work, run the still.
Right.
The thing that I liked about it, and I was kind of hoping that, this would be my position now instead of running a law office and a distillery, that I'd be maybe the guy running the still. But I always am drawn back into law because of, the nature of the clients needing you and so forth. But we are now moving basically to double our production. And we are just thankful that we barreled all that whiskey because we don't have any time to barrel whiskey.
Well,
Uh,
and barrels now are becoming more scarce because
the
tariffs.
Yeah, bringing barrels in
Right.
from where we were buying them in New York State. They're already ridiculously expensive. Oak barrels are a fascinating thing. Like they are a study unto themselves. And when I give people the tour, I start explaining to people the history of the barrel, and they're like, "I had no idea." That's
Yeah.
Or
passenger
their eyes
pigeon
are
is
glossing
involved in the
over.
history. The extinction of the passenger pigeon is so uniquely tied to the barrel, and the cod fishery is so uniquely tied to the barrel. But anyway, it's a lot of fun running the distillery and producing, like developing these products. And we got so good at developing brands that we're kind of now struggling to switch gears because our brand development people in our marketing company here that we own are like, you know what, we should be making this. We can make this. And I talked to Juan and he goes, yeah, I can make that. Oh, we should be making this. And here's a label and here's the bottle. And Juan, oh, well, yeah, we can make that. Kyla and I are like, okay.
Yeah,
Um,
it's great.
we're both working 12 hours a day right now. I
So
don't know how
it's
many more staff we can have. We're going to have to buy a labeling machine, and we bought another bottling machine, and like we're
Wow. So let me ask you this, but both of you, or however you want to pass it off. We just had a federal election. Seeing as I follow you everywhere, Paul, I know we are like-minded. And part of what our new elected, hopefully soon to be majority government, um, or Prime Minister Carney has said that one of the first matters he's going to deal with is to remove interprovincial tariffs. That with Deep Blue should have an impact on you. Because if and you help me if I'm right, if I was to say to you during the show, because I'm in Alberta, geez, Paul, I'd really love to try some of your whiskey or some of your vodka. Can I get some?
yes, if you
actually it's
drive
illegal
here
for
and
me to send it to you. Yeah.
purchase it.
Yeah, if I drive
I
to
hear.
Vancouver.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's so how do you, I mean, I think you're like me, you're enthusiastic about the possibility that these interprovincial tariffs and holds and restrictions will be removed. I've never understood all my life why they were there in the first place.
Quebec, probably. I blame
It's
Quebec.
protectionism, and it is Quebec is a large part of it. They set up standards for things that are different from Ontario, uh, like child car seats, for example, or materials that can be in sofas, or all of these things that are different from Ontario. And it really mostly comes down to protectionism. So they're ostensibly about one thing, but they're actually about another. And sort of the ridiculous examples are in Lloydminster, where you can't deliver food over the line from a restaurant on one side to the other because of the standards that they've got in their health services. Um, the fact that we develop this way is indefensible. From the perspective of a distiller, and I generally am a believer in free trade. There's always caveats, and you can understand that there's certain things like milk. You have to protect milk because you can
Mhm.
never be short on milk. You've always got kids who have to have milk.
Right.
The people must have milk. But for the most part, discretionary thing like alcohol,
I don't know. People must have gin. What are you talking about?
well, there's always going to be gin. We're never going to have a shortage of gin. You know, Ontario distillers have the distilling capacity to distill for the whole country if you want the same product, the same thing, and they can produce it pretty cheap. If you want something that's slightly different, you're going to have to go to different locations. A lot of craft distilleries, I'm disappointed with their product, and I worry about them being able to compete when it's opened up. Um, so here's the example, and one of the things that we were concerned about. A lot of craft distilleries will have one still. Their still will have what's called a gin basket. They'll make their gin on their main still, and they'll make their vodka on their main still. They'll just clean out their gin basket, but their vodka always tastes a little bit of gin. We
Uh,
decided to do it differently to avoid that. But it's hard for craft distillers to afford the good equipment to put themselves in that position to produce that high quality stuff. And so it will harm some who will struggle in those different marketplaces. But
Yeah,
I would
I think
rather welcome the exchange
I
and
I think even for
promote.
us, though, we are going to face problems with keeping up with production and demand if we are trying to cater to a national audience. Like we're already, you know, having to work a lot to keep up with the production for just what we have in the last few months. So, but that's a good problem to have. I'm not worried about
Well,
it.
we're 9 hours a day, 5 days a week right now, distilling and making mash and running our still. And we're looking at 7 days a week now. We thought we'd be giving more tours and selling more out of our store, but our distillery is just so hopping in there. And we're looking at potentially trying to run it 24 hours a day to be able to produce enough of the alcohol of the quality that we want. Um, and it's a small space. We can do it in there. We're gonna have to look at storage space, getting some more space for storage for empty bottles and boxes and all of those other things that you need. And it's funny because I now that we're running and operating, I've seen all the way through going through this process of getting the permits, getting the thing set up, that there's bottlenecks. And I
Yeah.
hate to use the term bottleneck because I'm in running a
No pun
distillery.
intended.
But the next bottleneck is unfortunately volume.
yeah. Well, and like you said, that's a good thing to be worried about if you're looking at it as just as a business model, for
Yeah.
sure. I mean, I know where I am in Canmore. Canmore has more than its share of craft brewers in town. Canmore Brewing being one of the more popular ones, certainly locally and in Alberta. I happen to know the owners. Their teenage son went to school with my teenage son. They just graduated, so I've come to know them really well. And they do. It's funny you mentioned about the tours because they have a very busy brewery, but they section off for guests to come in for a tour, but they also do a lot of functions there. They have their bars open to provide their product, and most of the craft brewers in town have tasting rooms, put on functions, put on parties. Like tonight at Canmore Brewing, they do a Friday throughout the winter community nights, and they'll do board games, they'll have bands come in, they'll have food trucks come in because they don't want to get a kitchen. It's too complicated in Canmore with the laws in this wonderful city. I refuse to call Canmore a town because it hasn't been a town since I moved here in 2020. But Banff is the same thing with Park Gin. So we have distillers here as well. So I see what your points are very well taken about, small business. We've got an idea. We want to do a craft, whether it's craft beer or if it's a craft liquor, but then it catches on, and then it's like, oh, now what? So
Yeah.
it's fascinating what you two are doing. I mean, I'm afraid to ask, have you got your fingers in any other pies, or is this just the two?
Well, I mean, I wrote a children's book that's about to be released on Amazon any day now. But that's
Oh,
like
what's
that's
the name?
it's called
What's
Sit
the
Still
name?
Jackson.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
awesome.
about a boy who he's very small and he wants to grow tall, and his teacher tells him if he sits still, all the energy that he's spending being all squirmy all the time will cause him to grow tall. But it doesn't quite go as he expects. I'll leave it at that.
When things
Well,
go
everybody, just let
sideways,
me interrupt for a second. I'll make sure all the links will be in the show cast roll at the end, so you'll be able to find all the stuff to do with the brewer, with the distillery, with the book, Acumen Law, and your individual information. So let me wrap this up by asking you both. We started off talking about legal marketing, so you have two different generations sitting in front of me, and maybe me as a third one. Um, I'll ask you first, Paul. How would you advise not a law student, a lawyer, first out going on his own or in a boutique firm, his first year? What would you tell him to do for marketing his firm?
Yeah. There's probably a pretty good example in Betty White out of Kelowna. She is a very capable person at explaining things, and you're going to have to accept the fact that you need to produce video in some form or another. And people want to see someone who can explain it in a way that they understand it. And so you have to create your presence. You need to be, unfortunately, we're not supposed to call ourselves specialized, but you need to be specialized. I never wanted to be. I wanted to be a generalist as a lawyer. That was my plan in life, and I'm as specialized as you possibly can be. I mean, Kyla and I just do driving law, and the rest of the firm does other criminal law, but we only do driving, which is and driving offenses, right? Um, you need to be specialized. You need to know your stuff. You need to be able to explain it, and you need to be able to explain it in a way that people will understand you and have confidence in you, which really is an issue of one of those things where the people who can explain it so everybody can understand it usually understand it. If you're talking up there, maybe you don't understand it as well, you know. And if you're talking down there, chances are you're not going to impress anybody with your understanding of it. So you have to find, and you got to find your voice, I guess. Um, don't be too afraid of social media. Be cognizant of the rules about it, and keep those things in mind. And Kyla likes to fight with people on the internet. She gets some pleasure out of that. Um, I just would advise or remind people that if you're going to do that, you're still wearing your lawyer hat.
Good point. Thanks, Paul. And so, Kyle, same question, but let me rephrase it a little bit. So, you've been out for a while. So, imagine you starting a sole practitioner practice in your first year. What do you tell them to do?
Make yourself available to people where they are looking for you. That would be the biggest thing. People are probably not going to Google you or go to your website, like Paul said earlier. And like you and I were talking about in the green room, be yourself. Don't feel like just because you're a lawyer, you have to now play this character of the, serious, boring person. You've probably got a really interesting personality. Let people get to know that. Let people get to know you, because clients are not, a lot of people think when clients are looking for lawyers, they're looking for credentials and they're looking for experience and they're looking for skill. They're not. They're coming to you on the worst day of their lives most of the time, and they're looking for somebody who can understand them and who they feel they can connect with. If you're yourself, if you show them who you are, you're more likely to have people drawn to working with you. And the other thing I would say, which is something I do, which maybe, everything Paul said about our distillery kind of puts it into perspective, is tell yourself every day, I'm so lucky and everything always works out for me. I promise it
Wow.
works. It's weird, but it does work. Paul can back this up. It's true.
Kyla is more trying to manifest that than I am.
I'm not trying to
But
manifest.
it's
I'm
No,
affirming
I know,
already.
but it can come across that way. I mean, the
No.
reality is that Kyla succeeds in so much, in so many aspects of her life because she's got such a fast brain. I've never won an argument with her, except unless time has proven me right. I've never won it at that point. Yeah, but you have to absolutely be yourself. There's no doubt about it. There was some studies I remember reading that Starbucks had looked at their stores and making them comfortable without being threatening by being too personal. And they found that with people's offices as well. We're not meeting clients in our offices anymore. And
Nope.
so, we kind of allow ourselves to be more our persons. And I remember reading a long
Aesthetic,
time
I
ago a
bet.
lawyer saying, you're always got to meet a client with a tie on, and you've always got to use this certain language, and that's to, again, control the client. And I never liked that phrase, control the client, control the client. I want the client, yeah, okay, I want the client to be persuaded once I've heard them, once I've developed my idea of what the method is. And if I'm wrong about that and they've got some feedback, I want them to tell me, because I don't want to go down the road and I've intimidated them so much that they're not telling me the important thing, or that they're scared to because they think they're being billed by the second. So I find it's more effective to be yourself with your clients and just, again, make sure you can explain it.
That's, both of you, that's awesome advice. And I'm going to do something just might be a little bit surprising. I'm going to give one little piece of advice. I'm not a lawyer, but the one piece of advice I'll give any young lawyer coming out is very simple. Do not be afraid to ask for the retainer. So many times in my experience consulting with law firms, back when I was a private investigator and when I was a sales consultant after that, before I got with Lawyer Locate, that was the biggest stumbling block, was lawyers being afraid to close on the check. And it's, to
Yeah.
me, go ahead, Paul.
You got to get paid. And if
Yeah,
you don't cover that off at the beginning, it actually looks kind of suspicious. And sometimes
exactly.
we don't know where things are going to go. And we have to tell people like, okay, we do things on a fixed fee basis, but sometimes we have to retroactively figure out what it is. But here's the general range, and we need a retainer to get started. But when we, again, fully explain it, people get it.
Yeah, exactly. So, guys, I'm sorry to say, sadly, this flew by, but what a great show. Pardon my voice, it's cracking on me again. I must be nervous being around you, Paul. Everybody that's listening, please, if you have any criminal issues, DUIs in particular, please in BC, reach out to Acumen Law and Paul or Kyla. And remember that they also have a great distillery called Deep Blue. Paul mentioned in the episode, and we'll list as many of those as we can where you can find their alcohol. Highly recommend it. Qualified. I haven't tried it yet, but it is my intention. Hurry up, Mark. Get the restrictions off so that we can get this from BC to Alberta so I can have some. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your days to join us. We really appreciate it, both of you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
Nice to see you, Mark.
So that's the show, folks. Thank you very much for listening to us. If you like it, please hit like. Kindly, having trouble with my voice today. Kindly subscribe so that you can get notified when our next show is up. And thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the LegalTube podcast. Ready to take your legal marketing to the next level? Our show delivers expert insights and practical advice to help you succeed in today's competitive legal landscape. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, this podcast is for you. For more information, check out LawyerLocate.ca. And if you have any questions, get in touch with us. Thanks for listening.